Most people believe their life is happening to them, but the deeper truth is this: life is happening from them. Your relationships, your finances, your opportunities, even the way people treat you, none of these are random. They are responses. They are echoes. They are confirmations of who you quietly believe yourself to be. And that belief, your self-concept, is always speaking. Your self-concept is not what you wish were true. It's not what you post. It's not even what you say out loud. It is the assumption you return to when no one is listening. It is the inner sentence that begins with, I am, and whatever completes that sentence is shaping your reality right now. You don't attract what you want. You allow what matches you. If you see rejection repeating, it's not because the world is unkind. It's because somewhere within rejection feels familiar. If abundance feels just out of reach, it's not because it's scarce. It's because ease hasn't yet become normal inside you. The world is not judging you, it's agreeing with you. This is why effort alone never works for long. You can force action, but you cannot override identity. The moment effort stops, reality snaps back to the self-concept that feels natural. But here's the liberating part. What was learned can be unlearned. What was assumed can be replaced. The moment you begin to occupy a new inner position, calmly, naturally, without desperation, the outer world has no choice but to reorganize. Not because you chased it, but because you became the version of yourself for whom it was ordinary. Creation doesn't respond to pleading, it responds to acceptance. When you feel worthy, opportunities seek you. When you feel chosen, love finds you. When you feel secure, money flows without strain. Reality moves to meet the feeling you settle into and call me. So the work is not to fix the world. The work is to decide quietly, firmly who you are now. Not someday, not after proof appears. Now, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Walk as though it is natural. Speak inwardly as someone who already knows. And watch, slowly, at first, then unmistakably, as life reshapes itself around your self-concept, because it always has, and it always will. Most people spend their lives chasing what they want, believing that desire alone is the engine of change. They want love, success, freedom, recognition, peace. They imagine that if they want something badly enough, work hard enough, or visualize it long enough, the world will eventually reward them. Yet the wanting never seems to end. The same patterns repeat, different faces, different places, but the same results. This happens because life does not respond to wanting. It responds to being. You do not receive what you want, you receive what you assume you are. Desire simply reveals what you believe you do not have. And as long as something is experienced as not yet, it remains that way. The moment you label something as distant, difficult, or reserved for the future, you reinforce an identity that is separate from it. The world faithfully mirrors that separation. At the center of every experience is an unspoken identity. Long before an event appears, a decision has already been made inwardly about who you are in relation to it. If you desire respect, but secretly see yourself as overlooked, life will continue to overlook you. If you desire abundance, but identify as someone who struggles, opportunity will always arrive with conditions, delays, or disappointment. The outer result is not punishment, it is confirmation. Wanting is passive, being is authoritative. Wanting says, I hope. Being says, this is normal for me. And reality responds to what feels normal, not to what feels urgent. The world organizes itself around the assumptions you accept without question. Those assumptions form an identity, and that identity acts as a filter through which all possibilities pass. This is why two people can pursue the same goal with similar effort and see vastly different outcomes. One is trying to become something, the other already feels like that someone internally. One is hoping for permission, the other expects alignment. Life does not argue with expectation, it fulfills it. The shift then is not in desire but in self-recognition. When you stop asking, how do I get this? And begin asking, who would I be if this were already true? Something subtle but powerful changes. Your thoughts soften, Your reactions adjust. Your decisions carry a different weight. You stop forcing outcomes and start moving as someone for whom those outcomes make sense. When you identify as confident, situations call forth confidence from you. When you identify as valued, people reflect value back. When you identify as successful, success no longer feels like a miracle but like a continuation. You are not convincing the world of anything. You are simply agreeing with yourself first. Desire is not wrong, it is a signpost. It points to an identity you have not yet claimed. The moment you claim it inwardly, the wanting dissolves and reality begins its quiet work of catching up. Most people live as though the outer world is the cause and the inner world is the effect. They believe circumstances shape their thoughts, that events dictate their emotions, and that other people hold the power to determine how they feel about themselves. But this is an illusion learned so early that it feels like truth. The outer world is not a source, it is a surface. It reflects, it echoes, it repeats, but it does not initiate. Every circumstance you encounter is responding to an inner position already taken. Long before an event appears, an agreement has been made within you about what is possible, likely, or expected. That agreement may be conscious or unconscious, but it is active nonetheless. Life does not ask whether you like your assumptions, it simply expresses them. When something unwanted appears, the instinct is to fight it, fix it, or blame it. Yet reacting to the mirror never changes the image. You can shout at a reflection, but it will never answer back differently unless you change what stands before it. In the same way, struggling with circumstances only reinforces the belief that they have power over you, which ensures their repetition. The outer world has no creative authority of its own. It cannot decide outcomes, assign meaning, or determine your worth. It only plays the role it has been given by your inner convictions. If you see obstacles everywhere, it is because you have accepted struggle as part of your identity. If you encounter support and ease, it is because cooperation feels natural to you internally. This is why attempting to control external conditions without addressing internal alignment leads to exhaustion. You can change jobs, relationships, cities, even routines, yet the same emotional patterns reappear in new forms. The scenery changes, but the script remains. The mirror faithfully reflects the same inner image until that image itself is altered. Understanding this dissolves blame. You are not at the mercy of fate, other people, or random chance, nor are you required to analyze every past event. Awareness alone begins to loosen the grip of old assumptions. The moment you realize that circumstances are effects, not causes, you reclaim authorship. When you shift inwardly, when you assume peace instead of conflict, worth instead of doubt, safety instead of fear, the outer world must respond. It may not change instantly, but it cannot remain the same. Mirrors cannot argue with what stands before them. They must reflect. This does not mean denying what you see or pretending circumstances are unreal. It means understanding their role. They are feedback, not verdicts. They are signals pointing inward, inviting a change of assumption. The world is always asking one question through every experience: who are you being right now? As soon as you answer that question differently, the reflection begins to adjust. New responses appear. Old patterns loosen. What once felt fixed becomes fluid, not because the world suddenly became kind, but because you stopped treating it as the source of your reality. The most powerful conversations you will ever have are the ones no one else can hear. They happen quietly, habitually, often without your awareness. These inner dialogues seem harmless because they are familiar, but they are shaping your life with relentless precision. What you repeatedly say to yourself becomes what you expect, and what you expect becomes what you experience. Self-talk is not merely commentary on life, it is instruction. Every inner statement is a directive being issued to the mind, and the mind accepts repetition as truth. It does not evaluate whether a thought is fair, kind, or accurate. It only asks one question: is this familiar? If it is, it becomes law. When you internally repeat phrases like "this always happens to me," people never show up for me, or I have to struggle for everything. You are not describing reality, you are defining it. These statements become assumptions, and assumptions quietly organize behavior, perception, and response. You begin to notice evidence that supports them and overlook anything that contradicts them. In this way, self talk becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. What makes this process so subtle is that self talk often disguises itself as realism. Doubt is labeled caution, fear is labeled intelligence, criticism is labeled honesty. But the mind does not hear these labels, it hears identity. It hears this is who I am and how life works, and it arranges experience accordingly. Every time you accept an inner statement as final, you plant it into the soil of feeling, and feeling is what gives words creative power. A thought repeated without emotion fades. A thought repeated with feeling hardens into belief. That belief then moves through your posture, your tone, your decisions, and your expectations, broadcasting itself outward. You may say outwardly that you want change, while inwardly rehearsing why it won't last. The inner voice always wins. It is the voice you obey when no one is watching. It determines what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you believe is possible for you. Life responds not to your affirmations, but to your internal agreement. Changing self talk is not about fighting thoughts or forcing positivity. It is about choosing which inner conversations you participate in. You do not need to argue with every limiting thought. You only need to stop granting it authority. The moment you replace habitual inner criticism with deliberate inner assumption, you begin to loosen old patterns. When you start speaking to yourself from a position of worth, calm, and expectation, the shift is immediate internally, even if the outer world lags behind. You feel differently, you respond differently, you anticipate differently, and that difference is what reality responds to. Your inner voice is always telling a story about who you are and what life will do next. That story is not neutral, it is predictive. As you change the narrative, you change the outcome that follows it. Everything in your life moves in response to how you define yourself. The moment you say, "This is who I am," you set boundaries on what can enter your experience. Those boundaries are not enforced by the world, they are enforced by your own sense of identity. Change does not begin with action or effort. It begins the instant the inner definition shifts. The phrase "I am" is not a description, it is a declaration. Whatever follows it becomes a lens through which you interpret events and a command to your subconscious about what is acceptable and expected. If you carry the identity of someone who struggles, you will find reasons to struggle even in opportunity. If you carry the identity of someone who is overlooked, you will unconsciously overlook chances to be seen. When the I am changes, perception changes first. You notice different details. You respond with different emotions. Situations that once triggered fear or hesitation now feel neutral or even inviting. This is not because the circumstances changed on their own, but because the internal reference point shifted. Reality rearranges itself around perception, not the other way around. The world is remarkably obedient to identity. When you identify as confident, people respond to you differently without knowing why. When you identify as secure, situations that once felt unstable begin to resolve. This happens not through force, but through coherence. Your inner state and outer experience come into agreement. Trying to change life without changing the I am leads to resistance. You can rehearse new habits, chase goals, and collect information, yet still feel stuck. This is because behavior that contradicts identity feels unnatural and unsustainable. The mind will always return you to what feels like yourself. Only when the identity itself is updated does change become effortless. As assuming a new I am does not mean pretending or lying to yourself. It means selecting a new inner position and dwelling there until it feels familiar. At first, it may feel quiet rather than dramatic. There is no surge of excitement, only a subtle sense of calm acceptance. That calm is the signal that the assumption is being absorbed. Once the assumption settles, the outer world begins to reorganize. Conversations change tone. Opportunities appear without strain. Old obstacles dissolve or lose relevance. You are not chasing a new life, you are allowing life to match you. The timing of this rearrangement is not controlled by urgency but by naturalness. The moment a new identity feels normal, reality treats it as fact. You stop asking when will it happen, because internally it already has. The need for proof fades, and with it resistance. This is why lasting change always feels like recognition rather than achievement. You are not becoming someone new, you are releasing a definition that no longer serves you. As soon as the inner declaration shifts, the world receives new instructions and responds accordingly. Feeling is the unseen force that turns thought into experience. A thought on its own is light and fleeting, but when it is accompanied by feeling, it gains weight, direction, and authority. The mind may imagine countless possibilities, but only the ones that are emotionally accepted take form in reality. Feeling is the medium through which assumptions are impressed, and made active. The mind does not create by logic or willpower, it creates by emotional agreement. What you feel to be true becomes true experience, regardless of what you intellectually believe. You can think a new thought 1,000 times, but if it carries no feeling, it remains theoretical. The moment a thought feels natural, familiar, or inevitable, it begins to move outward into expression. This is why fleeting visualizations often fail, while deeply felt expectations succeed. A brief image held without emotional involvement has no staying power, but a quiet, persistent feeling, especially one you live from, shapes behavior, perception, and response. Feeling is what convinces the subconscious that something is real. Emotion is not intensity, it is acceptance. A calm sense of knowing is far more creative than excitement or strain. When you emotionally accept an idea as true, even gently, the mind stops questioning it. There is no argument, no resistance. The idea settles, and once settled, it seeks expression. Fear works this same way. When fear is emotionally accepted, it produces corresponding experiences. Not because fear has power of its own, but because it is felt as real. The mind cannot distinguish between what is feared and what is expected. Both are emotionally charged assumptions. This is why worrying feels productive, but produces unwanted outcomes. It is feeling directed toward absence or danger. To consciously create, feeling must be aligned with fulfillment rather than lack. This does not mean forcing happiness or suppressing emotion. It means choosing the feeling you dwell in once the desire is imagined as already satisfied. Relief, calm, gratitude, quiet confidence. These are the emotional states that signal completion. When you rest in the feeling of completion, the mind receives a clear message: nothing is missing. From that state, behavior changes naturally. Decisions are made without desperation. Actions are taken without strain. Opportunities are recognized instead of chased. The outer world responds to the emotional atmosphere you inhabit. Feeling is also cumulative. A state returned to again and again becomes a mood, and a mood becomes a personality trait. Once a feeling is habitual, it no longer requires effort. It becomes the default background of your life, quietly shaping everything that enters it. You are always feeling something in relation to your assumptions. The question is not whether you are creating, but what you are creating from. When you choose the feeling of fulfillment and allow it to become familiar, you are speaking the only language reality understands. Most people are taught that effort is the engine of achievement. If something does not work, they assume they must push harder, try longer, or sacrifice more. Struggle is often worn as proof of sincerity, yet effort without alignment produces exhaustion, not transformation. Reality does not yield to force, it yields to consistency of assumption. An assumption is not a wish or a hope, it is an accepted position. When something is assumed, it is no longer debated internally. It becomes the quiet backdrop of thought and expectation. This is why assumptions are so powerful. They operate without resistance. Effort, on the other hand, implies opposition. It suggests that something must be overcome, which reinforces the belief that what you want is difficult or distant. When you strain for results, you are unconsciously affirming that they are not yours yet. The emotional tone of effort is tension, urgency, and often fear. That tone communicates lack, and what is consistently communicated inwardly is what the outer world reflects. Consistency of assumption works differently. It is calm, it is patient, it does not argue with circumstances, it does not demand immediate evidence. It simply returns again and again to the same inner position. Over time, that position hardens into fact because it becomes familiar. This is why persistence does not mean repetition of action, but repetition of identity. You are not persisting in doing, you are persisting in being. You hold the assumption of fulfillment even when appearances suggest otherwise, not by denying what you see, but by refusing to let it redefine who you are. Effort tries to move the world. Assumption allows the world to move itself. When you assume something as true, your reactions change first. You stop chasing confirmation. You stop over explaining. You stop bracing for disappointment. These subtle shifts remove resistance, and what once required struggle begins to flow. Consistency is what trains the mind. A single assumption held briefly does little, but an assumption returned to daily, gently, without emotional upheaval, becomes dominant. The mind learns what to expect, and expectation becomes experience. This is not magic, it is alignment. Many give up too soon because they confuse lack of immediate evidence with failure. But evidence always lags behind assumption. If you persist in force, you exhaust yourself. If you persist in identity, you stabilize yourself. Stability is what reality responds to. When an assumption becomes natural, action becomes inspired rather than forced. You do not act to make something happen, you act because it makes sense to. Opportunities appear not as rewards for effort, but as confirmations of alignment. The greatest power lies in returning to the same inner position without drama. Calm persistence is creative authority. When you stop trying to convince the world and instead remain consistent with who you are, the world eventually agrees.